The Clean Power Plan is the latest proposal of the Federal Environmental Protection Agency aimed at reducing carbon dioxide creation in the energy field. More specifically, the finalized plan was announced on August 3rd, 2015, and it will cut carbon emission from the power sector or the electric generating units by 32% below 2005 levels by 2030. Russ Baker, who is the Manager of Environmental and Regulatory Affairs, will brief us on these activities of the federal government and what our requirements will be and what our response will be.
Thank you, Director Green. Madam Chairperson and directors, I appreciate the time to be able to present this information to you today. We ready to go? The title of my presentation is the Clean Power Plan, What We Know So Far. And the reason I say what we know so far is because the rule, which is actually a new source performance standard for existing coal-fired generating units, is 1,560 pages long. It has several hundreds of pages of supporting documents. It comes also with a proposed rule for a federal implementation plan that is several hundreds of pages long, as well as a final rule for modified and reconstructed units. So the total package of it is well over 2,000 pages. It came out on August 3rd. We're currently going through the regulation right now to try to understand, but I've got some good takeaways, I think, that you'll find very interesting. My name's Russ Baker. I'm the Manager of Environmental and Regulatory Affairs. And one thing that we've done is we've taken a multidisciplined approach to reviewing the plan. It's not so much that it's just a regulation that we need to understand. There are impacts that are going to hit us operationally, that will hit us financially, that will hit us in the way that we trade our energy, and that will also affect us as we look to the future on what kind of generation sources we want to bring into our portfolio. So the team has included people from corporate planning and analysis, members of my team in environmental regulatory affairs, production engineering and fuels, which helps us so much with construction of units and maintenance of the units, energy marketing and trading, because we are a member of the Southwest Power Pool and our energy will be traded, and so we're going to have to account for that. Sustainable energy and environmental stewardship, because this rule is going to emphasize a lot of renewables. Business strategy and analysis, because of some of the programs that we may have an option of utilizing in demand side management and energy efficiency. And then business planning and analysis, which is also going to help us with integrated resource planning in the future and the legal implications of the rule as well. So multidisciplined approach to reviewing it, and we've been looking at it for a little over a month now. Director Green, as you mentioned, the rule on the surface is requiring a 32% reduction in carbon dioxide from 2005 levels by 2030. Those are commitments that the administration has made on a global scale. We're going to be hearing more and more of that probably in the November timeframe. There's going to be some United Nations talks where they're going to be talking about climate change in Paris in November. So you'll hear about these 2005 levels. What the rule, though, as I will show a little bit later, reflects back on our 2012 generation emission data that we're using. So 2005 is really used on the global scale, and the 2012 data is what we're going to have to work with in the state of Nebraska and at OPPD. It's going to impact coal producing electric generating units. It's going to affect current combined cycle combustion turbines. It's going to impact integrated gasification combined cycle, which is a really advanced type of coal utilization where you take gas out of coal and you use that to fire combined cycle. All of those types of units would be impacted by this rule. The rule focuses on developing more renewables. It incentivizes early deployment of renewables, and particular pays attention to low-income energy efficiency programs where a particular utility might be able to use clean energy incentive programs for early deployment of those types of programs Those would take effect in about 2020 to 2021, where you'd actually get like a 2-for-1 credit for deploying programs like that. It encourages a trading system, and at this point it's undetermined what that's going to look like, but it sets it up as an energy rate credit, which would be a rate-based type of program, or a carbon allowance, which would be a mass-based, and that would be tons of carbon dioxide that you reduce out of your fleet. That's part of the proposed rule that we have yet to know exactly what that would look like, and those are also elements that would be incorporated into a state plan as we move forward as well. So a year ago, we had a proposed rule that we were evaluating, and it was built upon 4 building blocks that used a best system of emission reduction to reduce that carbon dioxide. The final rule only incorporated 3 of the building blocks, but as you'll see, and I'll tell you, the 4th building block is going to be highly incentivized and encouraged in the rule. The first block was improved power plant efficiency, and in the proposed rule, it was around 6% improvement on a current coal-fired generating unit's efficiency. They've split the United States into 2 different regions. They have an eastern region and a western region. The eastern region is set at 4.3% efficiency improvement. The western region has a little over 2% power plant efficiency improvement. It shifts, as I mentioned, generation from coal to lower emitting natural gas. It shifts generation to zero emitting renewables. And again, a lot of incentives for doing that in ways that you can approach that from either a rate or a mass base. And then the 4th building block, which is no longer included, which we had characterized as kind of outside the fence of our power plant type of means of meeting this regulation. The EPA is now going to encourage those and really incentivize those through a number of different programs, but it's not required as part of this particular rule as one of the main elements. The proposed rule had really a cliff that we had to meet for these reductions. The interim period was from 2020 until 2030, but there was really a 1-step reduction to it, and it really looked like a cliff from a utility perspective. The final rule now has a series of step stones that go down, which I'll show in just a minute or two. It also highly emphasizes a mass-based proposal for clarity and trading, and I believe, and we believe in our analysis, that a lot of that stems from some experience that has already been gained through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a program that is used in the eastern United States, and California having a mass-based trading system that they feel has worked okay for those regions. One thing that we were disappointed about, there's no credit for existing nuclear generation. In the proposed rule, we would have got at least about 6%, which we didn't think was enough. They've actually eliminated any credit for existing nuclear. They will, however, give credit for any modifications that you make to a nuclear unit. So any changes that you make at that unit, you would get credit for those. And they will give credit for new nuclear generation sources that are brought on as well. So let's take a little bit of a look at what this means for the United States in its totality. And again, I can't emphasize enough, this is going to be a state-administered plan. So the state of Nebraska right here, we're looking at about a 40% reduction in carbon dioxide that we will need to achieve to meet this goal. It was previously 26%, so the hill has gotten a little bit steeper that we're going to have to climb. You can see some of the surrounding states in this darker blue area have a little more significant reductions that they're going to need to meet. And then some of these that are in not as dark a blue are kind of moderate, I would say, and then there's some with some very light blue that don't have to meet very much. And some of those particular states don't have a lot of coal-fired generation in them, so the challenges to them may still be great for what they do have in their portfolios. So what does this mean, really, at the end of the day? The state of Nebraska, looking at 2012 historic levels, when you look across all of the utilities in the state of Nebraska, we emitted 2,161 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour of generation that we had, or 27,142,728 short tons of carbon dioxide were emitted in 2012. You can see, as I talked about, there's interim periods that have reductions that we would need to meet as a state, but as a utility also. And you can see how they drop between 2022 to 2024, 2025 to 2027, 2028 to 2029, and ultimately in 2030, the goal that we would have to meet on a on a rate-based would be 1,296 pounds per megawatt hour and 18,272, 739 tons as a state of Nebraska. More telling is OPPD. And you can see our rate-based emissions in 2012, using a 2010 to 2012 average we took a look at, was 2,180 pounds per megawatt hour. That's slightly above the average for the state, and we attribute that because during that same time period we were coming out of flood recovery efforts. Fort Calhoun Station was down. Some of our generation would have shifted over to our coal-fired generation at that time, which resulted in a little bit higher of a rate of CO2 being emitted. The corresponding mass for OPPD is 13,274,867 short tons. And then correspondingly, you can see, again, the rate will not change across from OPPD or the state, because the rate is going to be an emission over unit time of operation of a unit. But you can see there's 13 million, and by 2030 we need to reduce that down to 8,411,831. A little over 4 million tons would be the reductions that we need to make in the corresponding rate. So there's a hill that we need to climb in order to meet this rule, but we have 15 years to do that in. And I would add, we've come a long way already, and I think you'll find this next slide very telling. So looking back at that 2012 time period, on a rate-based plan, you can see how reductions are going to be achieved and have been achieved and have been committed to be achieved over time. You can see right in here in 2014, we had a Prairie Breeze and Broken Bow wind farms with about 240 megawatts of renewable energy, which reduces that rate. Next year, we're going to be reducing our rate and emissions from North Omaha power plants units 1 through 3 with the retirement of those units as a result of the stakeholder outreach process that we completed last year. We also have committed to purchasing 400 additional megawatts of renewable energy from the Grand Prairie Wind Farm, which is going to reduce it once again by 2018. And then out here around the 2023 time period, in accordance with the changes that we've committed to for North Omaha Station Units 4 and 5, we're going to switch those units to gas. And you can see that at that point, we're going to be meeting really what the 2025 goals are at OPPD moving forward. But this shaded area and the future reductions that we're going to need to make from 2025 to 2027 and 2028 to 2029 to ultimately end up where we need to be at 2030, we still have some challenges that we're going to face in the future. But we've come a long way from where we were in 2012. The rule, as I mentioned, has an accompanying federal implementation plan. The plan is very complex. However, there is a lot of flexibility. So with that flexibility, I think we also have a lot of uncertainty. And part of it is the EPA right now is taking comments on whether we want to use a mass-based trading rule as a state, or whether we want to use a rate-based trading program that would use energy rate credits, which would be used then to offset your current emissions, and they would actually be incorporated into a calculation that is depicted down here. The mass-based is a little more straightforward, and as I said, EPA is really encouraging that because it's really tons of emissions, and then you would have allowances that you would either need to purchase or you may have an opportunity to sell to meet that. So a little bit straightforward, but just to show a little bit of the complexity that the states are are dealing with right now. This is a process flow that EPA has generated to give to the states to try to help them better understand how they should approach developing this plan. And as you can see, we have mass-based, we have rate-based. There are a lot of different options that are in it. On a rate-based rule, you also have to have what they call an evaluation, measurement, and verification plan. So the changes that you would make in energy efficiency programs that you would incorporate into the plan to achieve the goals would have to be measured, they'd have to be quantified, they'd have to be reported, and they'd have to be also viewed as being legitimate by EPA when you report on that. Yes,
Can you
Madam
just
Director.
clarify for the public that how this is going to be administered and how OPPD is not doing this alone, but this is actually being administered by the Nebraska, the state?
Yes,
and how
ma'am.
that's gonna happen?
Yes, ma'am. So again, I go back to, this is a state, it has been, it has been regulated through the states to create the plans. What we envision in the state of Nebraska, the utilities and every utility, I think, in the United States, is that those state plans will then incorporate those generating sources that they have within their state boundaries to help that state meet those goals. So currently, we are in compliance with the cross-state air pollution rule, which had a really similar setup to this, that had allowances. They had sulfur dioxide allowances, they had nitrogen dioxide allowances, and the state is given a bucket of allowances that you need to meet. Those were divvied amongst the utilities on a generating basis, and our goal then was to meet the goal that was passed down to us from the federal government to the state to us. I would foresee this plan being much the same way.
Thank you.
Again, the timeline for the plan, it was announced on August 3rd. We still have not seen the plan in its final form in the Federal Register yet. All indications are right now that it will be published in the Federal Register in October. So we're looking forward to actually seeing that in the Federal Register, because that's really when time clocks start on these Environmental Protection Agency regulations. The state plan must be submitted by September 6th of 2016, but EPA also offers an opportunity for extensions by the states, and you can have an extension for up to 2 years. I believe many states will take advantage of that to try and help them to better understand and then develop a plan that's going to achieve the compliance that they need to meet during these time periods. The compliance period begins on 2022. Previously, it had been 2020, so there's actually an extra 2 years that EPA has provided on that. This interim compliance period shows the milestones that need to be met, and then the final CO2 emission goals need to be met by January 1st of 2030. One of the big questions that always comes up is, what is this going to cost? Well, at this point, it's really undeterminable, because we need to continue to do a lot of analysis of all of those pages of regulation, all of the technical support documents. We need to have a better understanding of what this federal implementation plan is going to be. And we also need to work with the other utilities in the state of Nebraska and our regulatory agencies to try and better understand what this rule should be. The one thing that we are going to have to do is go back, as we did with our generation options study that we did. We're going to have to go back and revisit some of the assumptions that we made in that. And we're going to need to generate another integrated resource plan, and it'll need to be updated. And then lastly, the other part of this as well are, what are the allowance prices going to be? What are those energy rate credits going to cost? That's really going to factor into a lot of this analysis, and there's not a market that's well established for that. So we're going to need to better understand what other states are doing, what the Southwest Power Pool is looking at when they're looking at dispatching units. And the one thing that I would leave you with is the current cost of carbon that's used or suggested by many agencies and by many people that are doing analytics on impacts of carbon dioxide. They range anywhere from 20 ton to 50 ton. I've actually seen some that are upwards over $100 a ton. So if you have millions of tons of reductions that you need to make, and you're going to look at a allowance system to try and utilize that, it can be a very, very expensive endeavor. So we want to have a better understanding and more certainty on that. Of course, as you all probably recognize and have seen in the past, this doesn't go with without a lot of legal challenges as well. And this rule is certainly not exempt from that. There was an emergency stay that was filed by 15 states right after the rule was announced. It was in advance of it even being published in the Federal Register. The state of Nebraska also joined in on that lawsuit. The lawsuit is really focused a lot on authority of EPA to regulate and some of the process they're using for regulating CO2. And so there's a lot of concern by 15 states. We expect, because last Wednesday, the DC Court of Appeals threw out the emergency petition that was filed by the 15 states. We expect that it will be repetitioned once it's published in the Federal Register, and then, of course, some of the legal process will follow kind of parallel. Well, what are the next steps for OPPD? We're going to continue to review the rule, and we're going to do it in a multidiscipline fashion with input from many of the areas around the company that would be impacted. We're going to continue to read the preamble to the rule, which contains a lot of the assumptions and gives some keen insight into what the true meaning of the rule was. And we're going to really try to dive deep into that federal model plan to try to understand what EPA is trying to achieve with that model plan and provide comments to it and input if possible. We're going to work with and have continued to work with other Nebraska utilities and the Nebraska Department of Environmental Quality to share our understanding. We don't have all the answers. We don't claim to have all the answers, although I would argue that we have some of the most smart people in the state of Nebraska and utility industry, but we also want to hear what other people are saying. So we want to hear what their understanding is, share that information. We want to work very closely with our regulator to make sure that that they have a keen understanding of the utility business. Again, their job is not to keep the lights on like it is for the electric utilities, and I would venture to say that they don't have as intimate a relationship with our customer owners as we do. So we want to provide that input to them and continue to work with them on state plan development. We would like to encourage the NDEQ to file for an extension while that federal model plan is out under proposal, and wait till it's finalized so we have a little bit more certainty. Certainty always works to our advantage, as you well know. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that any of you may have.
I've got a question.
Questions?
Yeah, I've got one. Russ, on the mass-based versus rate-based options, I don't understand the whole thing, but with us, our involvement in the SPP, how does that work? Because if Nebraska decides to do one option and the rest of the SPP is doing another, I mean, do we have to be involved in the SPP's decision, or how would that work if everybody in the SPP made different decisions? And maybe if it's too much to cover here, then don't.
You know, it's a great question, Director Gay, and that's something that we're really trying to come to a better understanding. The Southwest Power Pool has done analysis on the proposed rule. They're doing analysis on the final rule right now, and what they are doing is trying to share their understanding, much like I talked about what we're going to be doing with the state regulators and the other utilities. They're also doing that to their members as well to try and help them better understand. And so I think the information that they share with us on what they could see from a market perspective, and then tapping into the expertise that we have at OPPD in our energy marketing and trading area, we're going to be able to, I think, come to some conclusions on what that could ultimately look like. Southwest Power Pool may, in fact, be a good organization to help kind of balance this across the whole region, but we're not really sure exactly how that would work and what the interactions with a state plan would need to look like. Obviously, that would have to be incorporated into the state plan, which means we need to provide feedback to the Department of Environmental Quality for them to even consider that. So it's going to, I don't know the answer that to the question that you've asked, but I think what's going to happen is over the next few months, we're going to be working real hard to try and have a firmer understanding of that and be able to predict what would be best for OPPD and for the state of Nebraska.
And then if I get another question, you know, I know this is a regulation. Nothing ever passed by Congress or whatever. I was surprised. I watched a little bit of the debate last night. I didn't see anybody even talking about this. Maybe I missed it, but so I was in and out watching that. But it's a big issue to ratepayers, as we all know, and we all have our different perspectives. But I just want to get it out there. As they get into this going forward, I know Nebraska is gonna argue and you're gonna look into this as best you can, but it's pretty disappointing what this is gonna do, I think, long-term to ratepayers. They took away block 4 because they couldn't enforce block 4 outside the fence, which is energy efficiency. We did energy efficiency years ago. You've been looking into this. So some of the things we've done already will probably prepare us better, but it's still wrong that the regulators go and do this. And I know they can, and this is the way the process works. But I do think, and I can only speak for myself here, I need to watch, and we all need to watch, how's this gonna affect the ratepayers long-term? Because you say it doesn't go in until 2022. A lot of decisions that we make leading up to that, we've already made, have been good or bad, but I'm worried about the base load generation. The other thing, I guess with that, I'll move on, but with no credits on that nuclear plant is ridiculous. And is there a way we can go back and maybe appeal this or fight it or do something? Because that's just a shame. I mean, we spend a lot of money to keep our nuclear plants clean energy.
There's also gonna be no credits for hydro either.
Yeah.
And I would just share the industry, the nuclear industry, the Nuclear Energy Institute is working very clearly on this. And obviously, when the final report is filed, there'll be an opportunity still through this process to kind of work through how nuclear is captured in this final plan and what that may look like. So that industry is getting actively involved in what that will look like. We do not know what the outcome will be, but obviously that certainly makes a change or makes an impact in kind of the plan as we see it for Nebraska, with 2 nuclear plants in the state of Nebraska, which is kind of unique across the United States and in many places. So we're currently working through our industry folks for that. We'll provide comment and perspective around that as well. Once the final plan is in the Federal Register, there'll be that opportunity to be able to do that. And so we'll continue to do that. And I would also say our commitment, one to the board and the customer owners, is whatever recommendation that we bring will certainly be balancing the need to maintain our kind of regulatory compliance as we do so well, but also do that in a way that is cost effective for our customer owners, whatever that may look like. And again, it's too early to kind of forecast that, but our commitment is to make sure we put together a plan like we did on our future generation plan just a little over a year ago, that we put in place to minimize any cost impacts, but yet still create valuable environmental changes and reductions in emission across all of our facilities here at OPPD.
I think the good news is that because of our future generation plan that we passed last year, OPPD is in excellent position compared to other utilities. LES, I think, is also in good position, but we're in very, very good position if you see into 2025. So we have plenty of time to plan for this. We're in very, very good position with all of our renewables and everything. And hopefully we can participate in some of the credits in trading with that. I think we're very, very lucky in what we're doing, and I think we're in a strong position.
I think that's why we changed our vision, as the board well knows, to leading the way we power the future. So I think you'll see us take that leadership position on many of these kinds of activities going forward.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.